Welcome to episode 5 of the EdUp Smart Space podcast, the future of campus technology, where we explore the advances in the intersection of learning, technology, and the built environment. Hello, I'm Craig Park, your host. Today I'm excited to welcome Heather Morgan, an innovative leader in higher education planning. Heather is based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and Heather has spent a good part of her career helping institutions design spaces that meaningfully support student success. Her work blends academic strategy, user centered design, and emerging technologies to create more connected and responsive learning environments. Heather, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Craig. Nice to be here.
Well, let's start by giving our listeners a bit of your background. How did you find your way into this world of higher education planning, and what motivates your work today?
Sure, Craig. I've been working actually in the manufactured construction field for about 25 years now, but I got involved with an education organization a good 10 years ago, the Association for Learning Environments, and it really led to, me focusing more on education because honestly, the dedication and passion of these members and others in the education field, it's really quite unlike anything else that's out there. They're really very dedicated into helping students and faculty achieve their greatest potential. It really resonated with me. While its focus is primarily K to 12, there's a lot of synergy with higher education and how we build out those spaces for learning. I currently sit on the A4LE, the Association for Learning Environments, global board of directors, and it's allowed me to keep that vast network and the learning. I really appreciate it. Another thing that I found really important as a parallel was earlier in my career, I was heavily involved in the promotion of lean practices in Canada and part of the group that started Lean Construction Institute Canada. The lean philosophies are helping construction industry resolve some of their biggest constraints, from planning to project execution. Even now, you can see how things like the advances in AI, they're going to be a big help in gathering and evaluating data and then starting to be used in a lot of higher education institutions as well. What I see in the future with that is us learning how to harness the potential. It's going to be a big part of how we move forward. And lean philosophies also provide more certainty through pre-planning, collaboration, and more efficient delivery. And it improves our chances of successful outcome, something that resonates strongly within the education sector, where budgets and schedules are tight and projects are often quite complex. It's led to many great conversations, and I know you and I have shared a lot of them over the
We have.
years.
We have. So you've worked with many institutions, K 12 and colleges and universities. How do you approach the challenge of translating an institution's strategic goals into a physical plan that was innovative and actionable?
When alternate construction technologies are being considered, that's really been my focus. It's been interesting watching first the pushback, but now the embracing of we need to do something different. When we're looking at those things, the discussions had to start very early in the planning stages. It meant that I was able to take part in conversations that really included a lot of the long-term goals of the project. If those discussions don't happen, we often default back to the construction practices that are outdated and they really don't support innovation or the level of exponential change that we're seeing. It is possible to more closely align the behavior of that built environment with how staff and students need to interact with it to support learning. We're really experiencing right now this real exponential change. You're seeing that in
Yeah,
technology, but it's also regarding learning and the nature of work. The more we support the diverse needs of the students and the faculty, the more likely students are going to continue to attend a bricks and mortar institution. Attendance and
that's
it pays
that's
the
the
bill.
goal.
Our built environment should not determine who and how a student can learn, who can come and how they can learn. Technology is playing a big part in that. Changes to furniture are miles ahead of what we're doing within the actual infrastructure. We're creating these agile interiors through furniture, but we're still using very inflexible and inaccessible materials to build out that actual learning space. It's limiting our ability to incorporate future innovations. Every surface should have a purpose. If you start thinking in that direction, it really changes the way we design space. So we're seeing a lot of operable walls, glazing to allow views to nature and daylight. A lot of that is to do with the biophilic elements of the space, writable surfaces, or just a standard infrastructure that will demise space with an external facing layer that can be removed and changed or altered to accept new technologies that are coming at us. What's coming is really fascinating. We're seeing virtual environments and robotics. There's such great examples. Just don't want that room when you walk into it to limit what you can do in that space.
And recently, a McKinsey study that was talking about the inefficiencies in architecture and construction and said their prediction was that the move towards prefabrication and customizable prefabrication, I know that's been a big focus of yours in the last few years, is really the future of architecture. And that relates to exactly what you just said. One thing that stands out in your work is how intentional you are about connecting space to student success. How do you help institutions ensure that their learning environments are not just efficient, but empowering and inclusive?
I believe that something that's going to fundamentally impact the future of higher learning institutions is how we define successful learning outcomes. Students are taking a much more active role in planning their learning paths. So they may enter and leave learning institutions several times over their careers rather than just 4 years and done. They might attend physically for part of it, then virtually for part of it, and then go intern and then start the whole thing over again as they come back to upskills. It changes how we design these spaces and how we need to think of the campuses moving forward. And I really strongly believe that higher institutions still play that necessary role. We need to interact together. We need to physically be there to strengthen those soft skills and build the relationships that impact those future careers. The role of higher institutions, though, are to understand how to continue to bring value. There's no longer enough just to have that big name to attract students. Understanding that plays a big part in how we design our campuses so that they're viable well into the future. The learning infrastructure has to be built to support that future uncertainty. It's not a negative thing, but it often means simplifying our interior architecture and building fewer barriers to adaptation. There's things that can be easily done through the furniture and the built environment so we can support a wider segment of students. Where we get stuck into, the neurodiversity and what's happening with kids, but it could easily be adults of all different ages now. Everybody is going to face a barrier at some point, whether it's physical, mental. It really is crucial that we start thinking of these spaces as just more inclusive overall and designing them that way. We can do a lot of that through furniture. I've got a lot of colleagues that have studied the furniture intensively. Schools often are purchasing too much or the wrong type of furniture. It really is actually impeding learning. If we can redirect some of those resources into building design, we can start staying within those budget levels, but still be able to achieve some of our goals moving forward. And we still see those classrooms that support rote learning. I know there was a picture the other day in Saskatchewan, those old desks all in a row.
It is the biggest frustration, and it's been a theme in the previous episodes of this podcast about the need to understand that while there is a role for didactic learning, that this current generation of digital native students expect a much more collaborative experience and a technology-rich experience.
Exactly.
What are some of the most overlooked opportunities when it comes to planning, well-being, collaboration, and access?
The problem is it was so easy to build. That rote learning, it was
Yeah.
easy to do technology. You and I had earlier conversations, and the most overlooked opportunity to support student success is just to make sure that they and other user groups are included in that discussion earlier. They need to be part of that design process. There's a lot of research out there. And clearly defining the goals of the institution is so key because without having those goals set and defended, it's too easy to go back to the status quo.
Yeah, exactly.
See? It's easy.
The default mode to go back to graphic standards that are related to where we are today. That's going to be a conversation with Dr. Lenny Scott Weber in a forthcoming episode of the
That's
work she's
awesome.
done in studying that. Go-
And Craig, you and I fall into those end stages of that baby boomer generation. My new grandson is in generation beta, and there's 4 generations in between. We saw the rise of technology, and students today are born to it, but their brains are literally wired differently to accept this kind of technology and to embrace it. Too often, we're still designing what we know. We're not really delivering the most supportive environments possible because we're defaulting to what is easy for us, what we can see. I know you have a window into what's coming. This is why this podcast is so important. We're going to have implanted technology. We're already doing wearables. There's just so much coming that we can't even wrap our heads around. I once toured the aerospace engineering building in Bordeaux, and it was really fascinating because the students led us on this tour and they were so proud of their space. They were showing us how they were conducting mirrored experiments in real time with the space station. These are kids, they want to be astronauts, they want to work into this sector. I asked one of the students as he was touring us around, like, do you expect to work on the Earth or on the moon? And he said, well, on the moon, of course. Do you want to see our pod? We're already working on it. The funny thing is, as you keep walking through the space, their meeting room still had that piece of paper with the tech support number on it and the PowerPoint projector stuck to the ceiling.
Right. Well, and that particular program is one of the very early ones that adopted AR and VR as part of the exploration of how these new space-based systems would work in order
Yeah.
to replicate that in our Earth-based locations. Exciting stuff.
Okay.
Technology obviously plays a critical role in how learning happens. You mentioned your grandchild in that and that beta generation. How do you help clients integrate technology into their planning without losing sight of the human element?
There's so many examples out there now that'll help us imagine what a woven city looks like, how it will behave. A great example, if anybody hasn't checked it out, is that Toyota's Woven City. They took an old car factory and created a living lab. The main premise of that is just how we start connecting technology to provide a seamless experience from home to school to work. They all have the devices. We may not no longer provide those things if everybody has them and brings them with them, but that planning for student well-being comes down to those collaborative discussions that anticipate the future needs and then building those learning spaces to support change. We've got student and faculty mental health at its most precarious point ever. We need to provide support, and those needs change with advances in telehealth and wellness technologies and a better understanding of the impact on how that built environment has the ability to reduce our stressors. Biophilic design is really proven to offer healthier environments for all if we've built our schools in such a way that they're not going to accept any of those changes. Then we can't locate services where we need quickly, or we can't add some daylight features or add some messaging that help us manage that space and also to accept changes in the use or need. And then we're really failing our future students if we really aren't considering those things. Fixed construction doesn't allow us to easily relocate or reconfigure our demise space. We can implement technologies that allow us all to make these buildings a bit more fluid. We can do a lot
Mhm.
better.
Excellent. That's very insightful. The point is that campus planning often means navigating a range of stakeholder priorities. You mentioned that earlier, and legacy systems and budget constraints. What are some of the tools to create alignment across these diverse perspectives?
Our learning environment planners, they're juggling a lot of balls in the air. So I get it. Like defaulting to that familiar is the only way to get it all done sometimes, or it feels that way. That's kind of where that lean hat comes in handy. We can improve our performance by meeting and learning from each other. It does involve more planning time allotted to the front end of the project, but you're seeing this in a lot of IPD projects, lean projects, quote a bit more resources at the beginning because that's where the expert information costs least to bring in.
We point out in our projects, I work in an architectural engineering firm, that the cost of change is much smaller at the front end of the conversation than it is after we've decided what this building is going to look like and we're starting to document it. Things get much more expensive, and clients are really working hard to establish what that baseline cost is going to be earlier in the design cycle than ever before because of limits in budgets and constraints in funding. So it's important for us to have those rich conversations. I really appreciated your point on the inclusivity of the larger audience of users, both faculty and students. That again has been a theme in the previous episodes of this show and seems to be a consistent one that we're seeing as a challenge that should be overcome with every project.
Just before I leave that, right? The part of that is they're applying a structure to the project, but that needs to be rigorously adhered to. Even as you're working with planners and you're working with facility and administration teams, it can't be just a lip service thing, right? Which is some of the things we see when you're adopting new technologies. It's like you get a week or two into it and think this is too hard and you let it all go. So the intended result is really to achieve that consistency in project delivery and outcome and budget. And over time, that certainty allows you to plan for the future with
Right.
certainty. It gives you confidence, and then you can start planning far into the future. If you know you can deliver a building within a certain amount of time and within a certain amount of budget and be accurate about it, it changes the way you plan your space. And if you don't have that time to immerse yourself in best practice, the next best thing is look to outside, right? There's a lot of research out there, and look beyond your standard planning team. Lean emerged because most of us started in rote learning. It
Right.
wasn't meant to develop critical thinking skills and those pathways. It was meant to support a heavily industrialized population. Lean is essentially trying to teach us those behaviors that we missed out on at the beginning. And there's so many examples of learning facilities that have been able to do this successfully and to be able to achieve their projects on time and on budget. I think that the next generation of architects and planners, they're going to be starting from a completely different space. There's going to be an acceptance of these things, and maybe they'll be moving away from more of those traditional iconic buildings that operate individually on campus in favor of a collective of interactive spaces, more like that woven city, that are built sustainably, that now start to build on some of these technologies we're talking about.
Exactly, exactly. Can you share an example of a project that you feel really captured the balance of innovation, inclusion, and long term impact?
We had a presentation by an architect out of Germany. They started in a small, modular home environment, and uh, they got a chance to start doing one school that was completely modular. It was interesting. They were able to create this incredibly beautiful space. It was light filled, had big corridors. It was simple in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, but they were able to deliver it on time and on budget. They were able to do that consistently. Then they were getting literally dozens at a time. That started their company, their
Mhm.
whole architecture firm. There's things that are out there. We're seeing a lot more of these projects that are helping to move other ones forward because of their success.
As we look towards the next decade, what are you seeing in terms of shifts in pedagogy and student engagement that will shape the future campus spaces?
There's a lot of factors that are going to impact that future of campus space. I think educational institutions there will continue to be faced with physical and financial constraints. We need to get as much value for our dollars as possible and look for new ways to deliver learning. It might not be all bricks and mortar environments. Some colleges are already merging to stay viable. Things like esports, they didn't really think that that was a thing.
And that's a in demand thing.
Huge. It really brings in a lot of students and a wider range of ages than you even think of. Esports is a fantastic way to build skills, right? Those tech skills are something that they need to stay successful in their careers. If we build our buildings with this accessible architecture and modular elements that are easily changed, as we discussed earlier, we can help our limited staff to be more productive. First of all, labor is a big issue, time, money, as they manage these facilities. If we make it in a much more accessible way, then we can get a lot more done in a short amount of time. We need a technology infrastructure that's designed to support new innovation to attract those students. Things like these esports, a lot of
Right.
campuses are building.
Our VR and mixed reality spaces and other things that excite students because they have not seen them anywhere before.
Absolutely. Those things attract students, which is money. So if you consider what an outdated campus that doesn't have any of those things, when you're going shopping for where you're going to go to school and how you're building your education, you're less likely to choose that. This generation's a little different regarding education, and they're encouraged to speak out. We're past that industrial model that really valued conformity. They want more input. A young man, he's now on a presentation circuit. He's written many books and he's only in his early 20s. I remember him telling us how current education just didn't even begin to touch what he wanted to do. So he built his own. They want to have that input into how and where and when they learn. Tomorrow's school planners and designers are going to bring different priorities and life experiences, and they're going to impact how these spaces look and function. If we step back to our discussion with our student that's expected to work on the moon, if we were building in space, imagine how much of economy that needs to think about design in space. Maybe we need to start applying that same kind of economy to our campuses. We're still building these buildings, but a lot of things you see in Europe are just wide open spaces that are able to take more things in,
Mhm.
whether they become collaboration spaces, whether the walls open up and now they become, large work areas. And the other thing is that society is already embracing wearable technology. We're using phones all the time. We've got smartwatches, fitness trackers. That familiarity is just going to open the door to further blurring of that human machine barrier, which is pretty darn exciting.
Exactly. I'm listening. Well, you were saying that, and I'm looking down, and I have 6 connected devices in
Right?
front of me, including my new smart ring,
Oh, cool.
because I was interested in tracking my sleep patterns. I believe that the digital cohort of students in that alpha and beta and Zs that are in the
Yeah,
campuses today have that same expectation, maybe even more so than we. I happen to be a tech-enabled native
yeah.
analog, but that was because I read a lot of Tom Swift when I was a kid. So, uh, and what advice do you have for institutions currently rethinking their strategic and physical master plans in a post-pandemic, digitally connected world? You've
That's a
talked about
mouthful.
this, but maybe you could reiterate that because
Sure.
it's important.
It is. And, and it ties back to we're one of the last generations that are not going to have some kind of implanted technology. Like it is, oh, there's a lot of things coming, but it's still like not an apocalyptic sci fi kind of way. But just understand that there are going to be advanced technologies like AI. We created AI, but we're not yet teaching students how to manage it. It really is going to change how we learn. It will come. We need a better understanding of neurodiversity and how a student's path to success might require options to alter our environment as they're choosing their learning or changes in pedagogies. A building has to serve a great variety of individuals. And there's a lot that we can impact through that physical space, wide hallways and benching and nooks, materials, messaging to improve mental health, wayfinding, things that support inclusion in terms of materials, colors. There's a lot of information around that. Things like washrooms and locker rooms that seem to have just gotten to be so acrimonious in that discussion. They just serve a basic human need. They're an
Hmm.
area there for respite, for hygiene, but non-gendered washrooms are safer, right? That should be our focus, period. And my advice to institutions who are like reimagining their strategic and physical plans is to, as we mentioned earlier, clearly defining those goals of the institutions and what they're doing to ensure their continued growth. They need to have a strongly supported program for building out their future space to make sure that they keep attracting students and faculty who are in their target market. They need to consider the potential that maybe they're going to merge or collaborate, which is already happening, right? Other institutions across the country are now having to work together or choosing to work together, which is
Right.
exciting. Technology makes our world so much smaller. It plays such a significant role in how we learn. Too often, construction's left to chance and habit, and innovative practices are easily deleted from the programming. It becomes a vicious circle. So, for example, if the campus has identified sustainability as a core goal, then it's up to the administration to ensure that they actually support it through their building practices. It's not just about energy saving programs and promoting recycling. We've seen too often where it becomes a core goal up front, but when the RFP comes out, those things really aren't supported. And we really need to understand that planning focuses on student and faculty experience and it commits the time to understand how this is going to support their strategic goals is going to help formulate their master plans. It really does create this circle.
I always close with this final question. You get to be an informed science fiction writer and tell us what comes after, what comes next in the world of higher education, planning and design. What's your crystal ball look like?
I think it's so exciting. It's really interesting. The Association for Learning Environments that I'm part of have a program called Schools Next, where kids get to design their own schools. You'd be amazed at how well those kids do and what they're bringing to us in terms of what their ideal learning environments are is not what we're giving them. It really is quite interesting, and I think it's exciting to see what's coming, and I'm excited to see the next generation have more input into this. I think what comes next is impossible to predict, right? We just have to accept that. We need to determine which are trends and which are certainties. There's a big difference between that, right? We need to work towards what we do know and not the things that we think that could just disappear quickly over the next little while. We know technology is going to continue to evolve at just an exponential rate. What we're talking about right now, it's not even going to be applicable in the next few years,
We'll have a different conversation again next year than we had this year, just by whatever has become on the horizon.
right?
Didn't have time today to really dig into AI, but perhaps in our next conversation we will, because I think we'll see advances in AI in the next year and two that are remarkable.
Without a doubt. And learning will change. The current model does not support enough of the population. They're seeking their own alternatives. If we want learning and education to continue to be successful, we need to redefine what success is. We need to build campuses in such a way that learning spaces are more agnostic to the use. So they can change in size or they might require adaptations to new technology and pedagogy. Finally, that current construction practices that are still often considered innovative, they're going to become accepted practice. So start there. Our institutions simply can't afford not to strive for the highest efficiency in all aspects of the operations. It might sound a bit daunting, but it's a tremendously exciting time for education and for learning. It's an opportunity to stop building for our generation and start building for the next.
Well, thank you, Heather. And thank you for sharing your insights and experience. Your passion for purposeful planning and thoughtful design really shines through. Where can listeners learn more about your work and connect with you?
Thanks for the conversation, Craig. I'm really happy to connect with anybody. The easiest is through LinkedIn. You can find me at Heather Morgan slash SK for Saskatchewan.
One of the most cool cities I ever had an opportunity to visit working on master plan for the business school there, how far the horizon reaches because of it's so flat. It was amazing to me.
It really is beautiful. It's
Exactly.
absolutely beautiful.
It is a big sky and a wonderful city. And I'm so glad that we met years ago and that we've been able to carry on this conversation. To our audience, thanks again for joining us. Until next time, keep asking the big questions and designing for the future, one smart space at a time.